Chapter 13. Hope did not arrive as a banner. It came like damp in the walls. The week after the machine and the key and Venbrandt's blood drying in a black lace on the stones, our masters in borrowed coats ferried bodies and messages with the same rough hands. They brought us fungus loaves wrapped in paper torn from ledgers, and those ledgers held words we needed. They brought water with a little salt to it, and the salt tang made us thirstier for what the paper said. They brought us new slaves in chains, and the new slaves brought news in their eyes before their mouths remembered how to move. Most stories slaves carried were the same and ended the same. Someone had tried to run and the quarter caught them. Someone had tried to bribe a guard and the guard took the bread in the teeth that bit it. Someone had been sent to the wheels and their knees had gone in the second hour and a hook took them out feet first. Those were the stories you expect because this place was built to make sure there were never any others. But underneath those there were different currents. A guard who turned his face away when a chain fell. A freight lift that came up from the deep with crates stamped in a language no Chanduraxian had ever written. White letters clean as bone against a plastic that had never seen the ash. A light that did not flicker when the rest failed, fed by a power that did not run through any wheel we could see. A man in a polished coat who wore a little lapel pin shaped like a stylized eye, and when he walked past the other guards stood straighter without us quite knowing why. It did not matter yet. We had our plan and it was the only plan. Take this hive and turn it against everything it sheltered. Use its own halls and its own doors and its own hunger as the knife. If we did not, this place would go on the way many things go on, by pretending to be inevitable. I had begun to see beyond it in my head. I could see a path across the long ash and back up the spine of Chandurax. I could see the rooms where the men in polished coats would kneel. Once seen, the ashen path burned. I shared it the way a fever shares itself. In whispers, in breath. The bone co-helped. It let me make my voice small enough to slip under doors. It gave back the voices of men they had known and never returned. All week I let that hope run along the pen walls like a current. It leapt the gaps guards leave between their boots. It soaked straw. It flavored the stale water in cups. People drank and did not actively comprehend why they felt different. It is a dangerous thing. Hope puts the hand on the door even when you have counted the men on the other side and know what they carry. Hope leads you to stand up and the bullet is already in the room. I knew this and I went on because the other thing is worse. The week was measured by the guards' rounds and the way the lamps hissed when the ninth cycle came and the air went thin. It was measured by what Lyra carried in, by what Dragon scraped under his tongue until we were alone. It was measured by the little marks I carved with my fingernail into the brick behind the piss bucket, one for each pen that said yes when we asked. It was measured by footsteps that learned to keep time with mine so that when I spoke the afterwind would be where it needed to be. We practiced the smallest kind of war. It looked like nothing. It was our whole world. On the second night our masters stumbled in with a man half carried between them and they played it like they were drunk and laughing and the guards laughed with them because men who carry whips like to see them used. In the dark they cracked the chain on the man's ankle with a rock wrapped in cloth and traded him into our pen for another who would last longer. The rock went back under a bosom where the densest part of a woman's breast used to be. The guard came and counted. Hope is not the only thing that makes you see what you want. On the third night the fans above the quarters went wrong for an hour and the air tasted like hot copper. I did not do that. I do not know who did. We were told by others, when the guard came to beat the slaves in the wheel room for breathing wrong, the wheel slowed and a man slipped and his foot got caught and broke and the guard laughed and the men nearest him learned how to hate better than they had the day before. When the wheel went back to speed, the airflow began to return. On the fourth night we scored the bolts on the hinges of the pen doors with wire until our hands bled. It is a little thing to do. It is also all that frees a door later when you need it most. Dragon did it by humming chants through his teeth with his mouth closed so the guard would think he was crying and the guard liked that sound and let him make it. On the fifth night a young man was dragged past our door. He had the look of a thing already thrown and crawling back. He said nothing. I shouted to him, and when the guards came to punish us I do not know if he heard it. I know 3 other men in 3 other pens did and bit their lips until they bled and did not cry out when the lash found them later. We count victories here by what does not happen. On the 6th night Lyra brought a note written on a strip of fungus paper and tucked into a fold of a slave's collar. The paper was oiled so the sweat could not bleed through. The letters were blocky and careful the way men write when they haven't been allowed to in a long time. It said, "Wheels stop when the whistle calls. It will be the kind that says fire, not the kind that says men down. We will count to 10 after the whistle and push. The pens will open like mouths." Dragon read it, grunted, looked up. "We're sure this is ours?" he asked. "As sure as we are of anything," I said. "Which is to say," Dragon put in, "not at all, but what else we got." He wasn't wrong. The only door is the right door when you are in a burning house. If you can tell it from the wall. We gave the strip back to the Missanger and she put it in her mouth and chewed it. On the seventh day the thing that had been bothering us slid into view like the top of a fin. A freight lift came up through the central shaft. The guards around it did not wear coats from the same tailor as the others. Their collars were clipped with little rectangles of metal that caught the light and gave it back the way water does. The crates on the lift did not rattle like scrap. They did not stink like fungus. They did not have the hairy frayed twine the rest of the world uses to tie what it wants to keep. They were banded with straps notched in a way I had not seen since I was another boy on another world reading about men who fight over words on paper. A symbol stood on the sides of the crates. Not the old Chanduraxian seal we had found in the deep, not the Bureaucratica's adjudicator mark, but a cousin of the latter with a toothier grin and a new line pulled through the eye. A woman in a white coat who would have been a doctor in any world but this one bent to read the numbers. A man beside her checked them off on a little slate that did not stain his fingers. When the lift descended again with empty racks, the power all through that level jump-started back to life in a way no wheel could explain. The fans ran smoother. The lights stopped their hiss. The air tasted briefly of a snow I barely remembered. Then it went back to the old taste. But you tend to remember when a place you live in breathes a breath it did not draw from you. Off-world, someone breathed, barely moving their lips. Or far enough down they've got some secret treasure, Dragan answered. It's the same thing, I said. He looked at me sideways. You already knew. I suspected, I said. The crates. The machines. I've seen stuff like it before, and then there's the way the guards look when certain men pass. The way the shears get paid in a different kind of coin on the deep floors. He snorted. Coin. But seemingly realizing something coin. Wait, the shareholders were betting something. Where have I seen that currency? But his recall seemingly failed him. We don't need to know the whole shape, I said. We only need to knock the teeth out of the mouth that bites us. He rolled that around, then nodded like a man agreeing to a bad job because the good one went to someone who had a father. That night the pens were noisy in a way that had no sound to it. You could feel it when your skin touched the stone. Hope travels in stone. It was the first thing we learned and the last thing any of us will forget. We'd been careful with it because it eats men if you feed it wrong. But the weak of it had not broken us. It had hardened us in the old way. It moved from pen to pen under the glance of a guard who did not think slaves know how to look without being seen. We still had to show them, the ones who did not believe their eyes could ever hold anything good again. So that night, the last night before, the scarred woman let me use her name in my mouth and the name was Casa. She let me stand up in the corner where the straw was thinnest and sing a piece of the procession with no words to it so the guards would think it was some man crying to himself over a child he had lost. She let me set the afterwind thin as silk so the men in the far corner felt their chest ease and their hands stop shaking and their bodies tell them things their heads did not trust. She watched me do it and did not kneel the way some had. She nodded once. To me that was better. Lyra came late. She had a bruise on her cheek in the exact shape of a man's hand and the fingers were long. She sat without saying anything for a while and then said, "They're moving a lot of bodies tomorrow. From the cages to the wheels. From the wheels to the lower forges. The whistle will cover the doors. If we don't go when it blows, we don't go at all." "How many pence?" Dragan asked. "Enough to make it ugly if it goes bad," she said. "Not enough to survive if it does." "Good," I said. "It'll force the others to choose." She looked at him for a time like she was deciding whether to trust a dog with a child. Then she reached into her sleeve and pulled out a sliver of clear glass the size of a knife. "And this," she said to me, handing me back my trusted pipe hidden in rags. "I know you'll use it well to make sure these crows never speak again." Just then the chorus stirred like the start of a storm that decides whether it is going to laugh or break a tree. Access fragment / match, 41%. Local map update, partial. Lyra saw me see something and did not ask. She gave me a look that said more than any question would have and left before the guard made his round. Some things are cleaner when you do not say them out loud. The last morning came pale through the lamps as if the hive had decided to pretend there was a sky. They woke us before the cycle horn. Men with clubs and men with hooks. We knew those men now the way you know a storm by its smell. They took me and Dragan out first, then Casa even despite her age because she had stood up to them once and they wanted to remind her not to and then grabbed a few others. They chained us wrist to wrist and shoulder to shoulder and marched us to the wheels. The room with the wheels is not a room. It is the heart. Everything else is a vein or a nerve. The wheels are tall as houses and wide as the kind of road the old world used to pretend it did not need roads for. The men inside them run like mice run in the stories you tell children and when they fall the wheel does not stop. The floor is ribbed with iron so your feet have something to bite and your skin goes there too when you slip. They set us to running. Our place with the others. The air in the wheel is always the same, hot, tight, flavored with old salt and iron and something sweet that is not edible at all. You cannot hear your own breath in there. You can only hear the wheel. You can only see the back of the neck in front of you, and the back of that neck is a mirror with sweat. I let my feet find the cadence they have when I sing with my mouth closed. I had been told it helps if you do not fight the machine at first. It notices you more if you fight it. It prefers to eat you whole when you forget you are food. We had to look like we meant to live like that forever. We did it so well that for a moment we believed it too. The whistle cut that moment in half. It is a different whistle than the guards call. It is the kind men use when the fire takes a house and you have one chance to get out what you want to save. It blew long and high and rattled our teeth, and when it stopped the wheel did not. That is the part that matters. Event flag, ignition whistle. Quest updated, survive the bastion / revolt, phase I, subroutine, potential node access signal via mycorrhizal network. I had no time for the system. I tasted rust. 10, I said. 9. Duragan picked it up. 8. Men around us did not know why they were counting and counted anyway, because men will count when another man starts and his voice has something in it that reminds them of a church no one ever built. The voice of men said, 7, and stumbled. At 1 we stopped. The wheel did not like that. It bit our feet. It pushed back. It found every cut and drove a little wedge into it. That is what machines do because men taught them to. It took 6 of us to slow it. 8 to find the notch. 12 to jam it. 16 to stop it dead. The sound it made when it stopped was like the first breath a child takes in a room where the windows are closed. It pulled your eyes to it and made you remember your first day of being alive, because men in my world have to work to recall that. The guards shouted. The other wheels kept running because that is their job. Ours stood still. Men dropped to their knees and did not get up so they would not be made to start it again. Now, I said, and the guards were already running toward the alarm handles in the wall with the keys that live there. That was the signal our pens had been waiting for. The doors across the way opened at once with a sound like a mouth unsealing. Some opened because a man inside had become a battering ram. Some opened because the week had done its work and the bolt slipped. Men poured out. Women poured out. They moved like water moves when it learns it can. We had minutes, maybe. Less if the deep floors took notice. It was enough and not enough. It was all any world ever gives you when you mean to be free. What spreads faster than hope is violence when hope finally finds a hand. A guard came at me with a hooked blade and I let the blade skid off my pipe-stented length and answered him with the butt in the mouth, and he went down on his knees and I made sure he would not get up by breaking the joint that keeps light in a man's eye. Another guard fired a metal storm that took 2 of ours from the hip to the neck and we took him under the knees and the storm went into the floor. Duragan used the chain to pull the rifle to his hand and threw it to Casa, and she used it exactly once at the man who had just held it. Men outside the wheel room heard us and made the only mistaken calculation men like them make. They thought they had time. They leaned on their poles. They asked who gave orders. They waited for a voice to give one. Our voice was already busy doing other things. The whistle was still echoing. The afterwind I had set while we ran did what it does for men who breathe in rhythm. It lets their fear go somewhere else for a minute, and in that minute you can do a lot. The system chimed again despite my predicament. Subroutine, local mycorrhizal network permission, Y/N. I mentally slammed yes to get the notification out of my mind. It woke a door open in a wall where there had not been any, and the door led into a corridor the guards had never used or forgotten. Men poured that way. We ran. We were not quiet. We did not bother hiding. That time is over once the first blood goes on the floor. Left, I shouted, and if I was wrong we would be dead. We went left and ran under torches that hissed with the gaseous poison that keeps lamps brave. We went through a market where men selling molds made into bread looked up with their mouths open because the wheel room does not come to the market unless a god is in it. Spine lift, Duragan barked. If we take it, we control movement through the whole belly. We took it. It was only 3 men and their rifles and the one with the eye pin, and I put Cinderfall note in his ribs before he saw me so his hands trembled when he went to raise his gun and he shot the floor and shouted at it. Casa took the other 2 with the rifle she had used once already. The lift door heaved. The chain rattled in its track like a snake with a bone caught in its throat. Spine lift B//control, contested. Local power, fluctuating. Warning, external authority query, denied fast, I said, and we jammed the gate with a broken pal because sometimes the old way is the best way. The cage settled to our level and we hauled the gate open and dragged men in. 2 bodies went with us because there was no time to pick them apart from what they had been, and they had names and I promise to say them when I can. The lift dropped like a slow creaking elderly woman. We were not the only ones in rebellion. 2 floors down, a pen door had opened to the shaft and a knot of men threw themselves into the cage as we passed with the faces they had on when they were born, of a grim determination that face men wear when they are prepared to die. We rode the cage down into the belly where the clean lamps burn. We ground the lift to a stop on a floor where the air was too clean. The guards on that level were not the same as ours. Their boots matched. Their rifles were made, not hammered. They looked at us like they had been warned and were glad. "Back," Dragon said, and we hunkered as best we could. A few men in the middle received welcoming rounds to the guts. Under the suppressive fire we had to move and I shouted as much on me. And we stepped out, left and right, into the honeycomb rooms of the shareholders' ring where the couches are and the mirrors and the walls that do not sweat. We did not have to ask which way to go. The sound told us. Men shouting. Boots thrumming. A man stepped around a corner with a mask pushed up on his head and a glass in his hand. He saw us. He opened his mouth. I reached him before the sound came out and put the pipe into the soft place under the jaw and his knees went. Gravity is honest and his gut was not. "Take rooms," I said. "Don't get lost." Casa hit a door with her shoulder and it went in. The room inside was all glass and metal and men who had never in their life been hit with anything but the back of a hand. We obliged them. Dragon found the panel with the locks and the list and the map of who owned which pen and the keys that went with them. I looked at that map long enough to know where we should go next and then I let it go. There was a security intercom system, something like an old PA but more advanced. I didn't know if the other pins would hear it but I took the thing and shouted. "Pens A5 A9, I screamed. "Will 2. Forge East. If you can't find it, make it. If you can't make it, break it." Dragon had taken his pipe from a dead man who had never used it and set it across his shoulders like he was plowing a field as the old world taught him. He looked at me. "We going to take this whole place?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "because the word matters here." "We are?" Not all of that day belongs to any one man or story. It ran. It broke and broke again. We lost men at the gates of rooms we had no names for. We took rooms none of us ever thought to see. We found a door with the eye symbol on it and inside the lights were not lamps. They were tubes and wires and something blue the sky would not have liked, and in that blue was a table and on that table a thing that had started as a man and been invited to be more without being asked, and I made sure it did not wake for any more invitations. We found crates with letters on them that I could not read, and in those crates were tools I did not know how to hold, and I had to remind myself that knowing the name of a thing is not the same as owning it. We took what we could carry and what we could not we broke, and what we could not break we pissed on. It is not strategy. It is sacrament. Word ran ahead of us the way a dog does in a yard after the winter is over. It came back licking blood from its mouth and wagging its tail because dogs do not know what they carry sometimes, only that it is hot and still kicking. By the turn of a wheel shift that day, the hive had learned to scream in a new pitch. The deep floors started to close their own doors without asking the men inside if they wanted them to. The fans in the upper corridors turned backwards. The lamps went flat. Somewhere far above us there was a sound like the winding down of a great engine. We were a long way from done and a longer way from safe. Hope did what it does when you give it a body. It stood up and used it. It made men taller than they are. It made women put their hands on steel they had only looked at. It also started to carry itself around like a man who has been drinking, and I had to shove it back into the right rooms as hard as I set it loose in the wrong ones. Late in the day we hit a quarter that did not belong to the hive. That is the best way I can describe it. It was too clean even for the deep floors. The air tasted wrong. Not sweet. Not the poison we knew. Different. It made the hair we had left rise by its own will. The door at the end had a seal on it. The same eye with the new line. The rectangle in my hand heated. The chorus flinched like it had heard its name in a place it did not like. Durajin looked at me. "We going in?" he asked. "Not today," I said, and for the first time since we left the pits I felt a cold that had nothing to do with the stone. "Not until we own the keys." He did not argue. We fell back. We took 2 more floors. We left men in rooms that needed men to be held. We gathered others like netting gathers fish and helped them remember how to be people and led them to doors they could break. We did not stop to count the bodies. I will count them later and say the names. By the time the lamps hissed for the last cycle the hive was split in 3, what we held, what they held, and a third piece that was neither and both, where men with knives and women with cast iron pans died in droves to men with rifles and guns not of this world. We drank what we could find and called it water. We pressed our backs to each other and felt the chorus of our breath move in and out like the wheel we had stopped, and we did not run because we had nowhere to go. "Let them risk it," Durajin said when I told him we were surrounded. "We weren't living before. Many will die. Hope is our blade," I said. "It cuts both ways. Then we'll bleed on the right floor," he said. A grim smile graced his face, and lay down on a rug that had never had a man like him. Chapter 14. We did not win the hive in a day. We won hallways and lost them. We won stairwells and lost them. We won air for an hour and breathed it, and then the air belonged to another man's jurisdiction again and made to taste like we were borrowing it. The lamps changed tone when control changed hands. If the light went blue-white and steady, you knew some deeper circuit had taken charge. If it buzzed and sputtered and glowed the color of rot, you knew it was us, bodies and wheels and luck. At dawn cycle the first morning after we broke the wheels, the pens poured. Men and women with cloth wrapped round their hands, eyes raw, voices cracked with the new use. They came laughing, the laughter that sounds like crying, carrying hooks and pans and broken chair legs and guns we had no rightful claim to except for the fact that we were the ones still alive to hold them. Every uplifted face turned toward us like sunflowers to a lamp. I felt the weight of that and understood how priests go mad. We moved like a river with knives. "Take the cross corridor," Durajin commanded in his farmer's bark. "Bolt it from this side. Casa with me, bar that hatchway and shoot the first man who tries to open it with talk." Lyra ran between sections with her whip coiled under a stolen coat where messages had been sewn into the lining. She had 10 lives in her stride and spent one every time she turned a corner. We learned the floors. We mapped them with our feet. Forge East was ours by noon, every crucible tipped, every mold seized. We bricked a passage with ingots and bodies. Wheel room 2 and 3 remained stopped. The scavenger markets we raided, slaughtering all the chrome merchants who remained. Seizing the goods through the right of combat. My ear ticked softly when I breathed beside certain conduits. The chorus reminded me, the faint counting of particles undercutting the roar. Somewhere near those ticks the hive ran on power that did not come from our wheels. I marked those places with char in case they need to be broken in the future. By afternoon we had a line. It ran in a ragged arc from the spine lift through the shareholder ring out to the fungus vaults and back along the march of the forges. We had a hold up and down and a way to carry the wounded between them. Men dug with rebar into the mortar between floor plates and stacked fungus sacks into low breastworks. We broke holes in the floors and moved makeshift ladders between them. The first time a volley came down one of the long corridors, it surprised everyone by how much it sounded like rain on a tin roof. The second volley we were ready for. We lay behind the sacks and heard the lead patter. The third volley we answered. On my breath, I told the line at the shareholder sweep. I opened my mouth and let Apogee Lament go, a thin cone of cold sorrow rolling down the stone like fog dredged from a lake at dawn. The men on our flank who had begun to panic stopped moving their feet without knowing why. The ones with guns found their aim steadier. Canter. The crows and his men lead me to the pen, only there to die. Chorus. All slaves, meat and tallow, happy shall we die. Way hey, Bell and Nell, hear the tallyman cry. All slaves, meat and tallow, but hear our answer rise. 1 bell, 1 knell, 2 crows tallied for each of mine. Verse, Apogee Lament, cast ablation halo, echo, 30% afterwind, laden ring established allies in field, plus composure, minor regen knells, -1, greater than 6 tenths. I layered cinderfall note after note into the faringle, a breath of fallout, a smear of sting in the air where their rifles winked. The next man who tried to shoot us cursed as the note hit him like a truck. Durajin's laugh came out like a cough. We lifted our heads above the sacks and fired. Pipes. Hooks. The old rifle we had taken from a man who had died trying to keep us in the pens. 2 guards went down. Another crawled for his dropped gun and found he did not have fingers. Advance to the corner, I said, and we belly crawled in the afterwind slow blessing until we hit the bend and rolled into cover. There were cheers then. It was ugly cheering. Hungry cheering. I did not stop it. I watched the faces it put light into and I felt the shape of the world we were trying to make and knew it would always be built out of the world we had. The new world would be our ossuary. We fought floor by floor that way, a Stalingrad of stone and steel, except the sky was under us and the earth pressed down. Men dug in behind low walls. We cut murder holes through ventilation grills and fed the angles with scraps of mirror to throw the light we needed into places the lamps didn't serve. We stretched wire at ankle height and learned to keep our own feet from it. We went through mold bread like bricks in a construction project. Every hour someone lit a little stove to boil rat and fungus and scrap meat into a soup that not even the poorest pilgrim would bless, and everyone drank. The fifth day the off-worlders came. We knew them before we saw them because the light took a deep breath and steadied everywhere at once. The fans stopped complaining. Somewhere wind moved where there should not have been wind, as if they could summon a breeze from the dead lungs of Chandurax. The first man who saw them was an old gardener at the fungus vault who had never held anything but a rake in his life. He dropped the rake and ran and did not stop running until his breath was gone. He crawled the last 20 paces and said, "Blue glass men," and then threw up at my feet. They weren't actually glass. They were men who spoke a language we did not speak. They moved with the kind of economy that says the joints have been taught to speak to one another without a brain in between. Their rifles did not misfire as ours did. Their steps did not ring on the grates. Where a Chanduraxian guard would come around a corner waving a barrel and a curse, the off-worlders came around with an angle already solved, the muzzle preset to the point a shoulder would have to pass if a man wished to live. They wore the eye and slash on their breast. Some wore a different pin, a small square that caught the light like a frozen drop of water. Their armor wasn't thick. It didn't have to be. Their skin had learned a new way to stop knives and bullets. They smelled like cold metal and antiseptic, not like the pressing stink of a Chanduraxian. The first squad took the shareholder ring back from us in 6 minutes. They did it like a man does a chore, just swept over us. 2 came up the spine lift like ghosts and stepped out through our gunfire as if the bullets were a schoolyard rain. 2 more came in from the maintenance crawl that Casa swore no one should be able to squeeze through. A 5th waited at the far end and picked Reagan's newly acquired hat off his head without clipping skin. Oh fucking come on, I loved that hat. After that Reagan was back to chanting prayers like the old days. Cinderfall notes flew from my voice. Catching the one with the square pin, he stuttered. His weapon slipped a minor hiccup, if not for in that half-step Casa's single round found the seam at his hip and made his leg forget its job. He went down and did not get up fast enough. Men pulled him into the dark and taught him the language of the planet we live in. We lost 4 teaching it. We fell back a corridor and set the fungus sacks anew. Dig, I said. Lower. Angle. Gasping for air. We dug like dogs. The sight lines changed. We built a little trench in a hallway never meant for trenches. We learned to put bodies where the wall would have gone if stone and sack had not failed us. There was no time to carry the fall into rooms with doors. We whispered names to each other and pushed on because there was nothing else but the fight. The 8th day the off-worlders stopped acting like they were doing a cleaning and started acting like they were at war. They brought plates you could not see that hummed at the edges. They put them in doorways and the air in front of them went static and wrong. When a slave ran at one it made the sound that reminded me of those electric fly swatters. They breathed through valves that closed with a little click when the air got too fan coarse. From above, Lyra gasped into my ear, hair plastered to her skull with sweat. And below. They're not using the lifts. They're riding their own transports down from the surface. They're pinching us. They had the maps that weren't on the panels and scraps we'd stolen. They moved along the hollow between floors where pipes live and cables sleep. They dropped down through service hatches in our ceilings like men assured of victory. At the same time a second cadre pushed from the deep, from the clean floors where the air tasted like a lie on Chandurax. And those men moved slower because even they had to take the stairs after what we did to the lift. We had broken spine lift B on purpose after we used it the last time. The doors on both levels hung crooked in their tracks like broken teeth, and that bought us part of a day. The slaves were still in good spirits that morning. They shouted when a room fell. They shouted when a room held. They shouted when men carried water. The shouting filled the corridors so thick the bullets had to push through it. By evening the shouting had gone thin. Not gone, just braided with the other sound. The one that says we're surviving but we are not sure we like the way it feels. Hold the forge throat, I said, throat raw. If they take the crucibles, they take the second level. We shaved the ingots down with hacksaw blades to wedge in the floor grates. We tipped the crucibles when a blue glass man came too close and the metal splashed onto his boots and cooled there in plates. He peeled it off with his hand like wax and lodged the hand back into the sword thing. Dragon laughed once at that impossibility. When the drone came we heard it before we saw it. A whine like a gnat in a bottle. I felt the tick deepen in my ear. The off-worlder behind it maneuvered in sideways at high speed and put a neat line of holes in the wall at eye height in case our eyes had been there. We pulled back again. Another corridor. Another low wall. We dug. We bled. A man named Aska who had been a cook and had learned to swing a pan like a mace took a round in the shoulder and kept swinging with his left arm until the man he hit forgot how to breathe. Casa's hands shook only when she reloaded. The rest of the time she was a quiet machine. Numbers? Dragon asked me. His voice did not tremble. He had tied his bad arm to his torso with a strip of cloth cut from a couch that had been expensive before the world ended. Falling, I said. Ours more than theirs. Names, he said. Later, I told him, but the chorus had already begun to stack them in the places it keeps such things. It does not forget. It will make me say them all. We held 2 half-floors by the 9th day, a crescent of rooms and shafts that could speak to one another by pipe or by runner. We lost the shareholder ring twice and took it twice and then left it as a no-man's land full of glass and rebar. We learned to carve holes at ankle height to hide in because the off-worlders did not look down as often as a man does who has had to watch where he put his feet his whole life. In the small hours of that day Lyra skidded into the trench we'd made out of 2 tables and a prayer. She put her mouth to my ear to be heard over the buzz wail of the lamps and the methodical stutter of fire from 3 places at once. "They're coming up from the sump, back-flooded it all the way up," she hissed. "From the lowest drain. They have rebreathers. They are splitting to the numbered shafts. We will be cut into rooms." "How many?" Duragan asked. "Not enough that we can't kill them," she said, which is a number a soldier gives when the number you want would break morale. We could hear them soon after. Not boots. The brush scrape of men moving belly down across damp concrete, the squeal of rubber against runnels, the whisper of air drawn through valves. It's a sacred kind of sound if you are a hunter in the absent forests of Chandurax, the moment the deer realizes the crow is already holding its life in its jaws. I set epitaph tag on the doorway to our left, the quiet verse, the one that marks without breaking, a note laid on a name, and let cinderfall note follow it like heat follows shadow. The wall under the jam blushed. The first man through took the slow fire into him without knowing he had been kissed by anything. He did not scream. He sat down with his back to the jam and tried to stand up and found he was too tired to do it. 2 more men tried to pull him away and the mark moved with their hands like a brand you can't set down. Verse, epitaph tag, cast, tens, verse, cinderfall note, cast Sinjax to scourge, Nels, +2, epitaph kill, 7/10. The moment he died a little wind woke from the floor and turned gentle and I felt it in my bones more than on my skin. Our afterwind. Men drew it into their lungs and remembered their hands. The off-worlder behind him paused. He was too well trained not to notice. The pause was long enough for Casa to do her single act of levitation, raise the muzzle, set the sight, breathe out, send one. It took him in the cheek where the mask did not reach, a pink mist, and his body folded with elaborate politeness as if excusing itself from dinner. "Left flank," Duragan said, and we threw fungus sacks into the breach as if we had enough fungus we could waste it, as if telling a lie to the world would make it believe it. They pushed from above at the same time, down the maintenance crawl we had used yesterday. They didn't bother opening the panel that made a door, they cut it with a hot line of something that smelled like rain on stone. The slab dropped. A man in a white coat with a square pin leaned into the glow and looked at us like we were a problem that had sprouted legs. I put apogee lament into his eyes. He blinked once, slowly, as if he'd been caught off guard, and by the time he was ready to proceed Duragan's chain had caught his ankle and introduced his teeth to the floor. Yet it took a few extra stomps to bring this crow down. Every corner of those hours had dialogue in it made of the noises bodies make at work. Coughs. Grunts. The high, keen of wounded men that think he is the only one that has ever hurt. In the breaks between those we spoke like men speak in a factory, short, loud, with love hidden in the word that carries the name. "Water," Casa barked. "Down the line." "Reload," someone answered in panic. "Left clear," Lyra said, and I cannot tell you how much joy there is in a voice saying a thing like that in a place like this. "Sell," Duragan said once, voice small behind the big guns. "How long?" "Until the end, brother," I said, and he nodded. "Until the end." He roared and it was taken up the line because it was the only answer anyone from the pits and pens would accept. We made a trench out of the long dining hall on lower 12. We flipped the tables. We broke the legs to wedge them in the barricade like spikes. We built a wall of refuse sacks at the far end and cut slits in them with knives so the bullets could look out. It looked like a picture a child draws after someone tells him what war is. The off-worlders took the quarter that ran beside it and dropped a plate in the doorway. You could see the edge of it as a shimmer where nothing else shimmered. Men tossed pans at it. The pans bounced. A wounded man crawled forward on his belly and held out a broom to see if the broom would die. The broom survived long enough under the fire of the off-worlders to let us know the plate would stop a man and not a stick. "On 3, I said. 1. 2, and we hurled the last of our homemade explosives behind it. They were not gods, then. Just men in a different skin. We held that hall. We lost 2 others. The pincer closed. Above us a series of boots moved in a rhythm you could set a metronome by. Below us a sound like a river in a tunnel became a sound like a flood. The few men left who had survived the games at the last show did not call what they felt fear. It was the return of the ever-present inevitability of certain death. By the 12th day the map in my head looked like a wound. We had a bulge around Forge East and the fungus vaults. The off-worlders own the deep ring and the sump approaches. The shareholder ban was a bleeding edge we put our faces against every hour and let it teach us the same lesson until we learned how to make the teacher bleed too. Above us, somewhere near the opening to the true surface, Chanduraxian men still loyal to the corporation had built a ring of habit and hate and held there with the murder hole patience only of people who think they only need but wait can manage. We were starting to run out of bodies. I slept at a table because it was flat. I woke up when the table moved. We did not bury men, we never have. We poured spirals on the floor and rolled the bodies into the space behind the sacks and suffered the taste of air that passed through flesh. We said the names when we could. The Bone Co said them for me and men pretended not to shiver because love and superstition wear the same coat in places like this. The 13th day broke on a lamp that did not flicker. Spine lift A, Lyra said, sliding into the little room we had taken for a post. They repaired it in the night. They are coming up from the sump in A and down from the crown and see they mean to kiss our asses on both cheeks. Then we stop the crows here, Dragon said. His eyes were bloodshot red, but not from crying. I stood and my legs felt like wood someone had left in a river. The pipe was light in my hand because I had forgotten it was there. I went to the door and looked down the long run where the fungus sacks made the world smaller in a way that makes a man feel safer until the bullets come closer for comfort. Hold this, I told Kassa. If it breaks here, it breaks everywhere. She nodded and did not waste breath saying anything in reply. Lyra, I said, run to the wheel room. Tell them to flood the corridor to the sump with steam. Let's hope it cooks those crows to bone. And you? She asked. We are already cooked. She flashed her teeth in a grim smile until the end she said and was gone. Dragon leaned his shoulder to mine for a second, awaited Sheridan returned. We will bleed on the right floor, he said again, and there was no laugh in it. I drew breath. I sang the lament that weakens hands and strengthens spines. I laid the haze where their rifles would need to see. I felt the wind wake at our ankles, thin and stubborn, and knew it would not be enough. They hit us from the crown with a discipline that made me want to die before it got a chance to teach my men what it was to be an animal in the eyes of a superior being. They hit us from the sump with a patience despite the broiling steam. Lyra's steam had come up the corridor in a sheet that made the air sing and men screamed in it and we did not ask whose men they were. We bent. The line bulged backward. Kassa's rifle barked the way a dog barks at wolves not because it thinks it can kill them all but because it has been asked to stand watch over its family's door. Dragon threw his chain and missed and threw it again. We held. Then we did not. Then we held again. Somewhere in that sway the lamps went very bright, brighter than any lamp in that place had ever meant to go, and the clean corridor with the eye and slash on its door whispered open to a depth of black that made the hair on my arms rise by its own thought but we have no choice but to plunge forward. The chorus made a sound I had not heard before, the silence a choir makes when the conductor lifts a hand to stop a wrong note. External authority / priority, critical. Handshake request, node. Permission, Y/N not now, I said aloud, and men thought I was answering a prayer. A round sparked the wall by my ear. Stone dust sugared my tongue. Cell, Kassa snapped, left. I turned and the left was full of a man who had learned to move like water. His mask was up. His eyes were human. He looked at me like a man looks at a door that will not open. He collided with me smashing me in a full-body tackle before I could rear my pipe up. Through blurred vision and the pain I watched the man turn varying shades of purple as Dragon's chain shook the very life out of the man. It took much too long. We fell back one more corridor section running down the path in the dark until we hit a room like an office with a door we could not open. Cell, Dragon said softly, this is where we stand. This is where we stand, I said. We dug our heels into the oddly clean floor and raised what we had left, and I took breath for another song and held. The chorus chimed again. External authority / priority, critical. Handshake request, node. Permission, Y/N.